Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Compendi RX Long COVID webinar. My name is Beth Lamorgese, and I will be your host. Thank you so much for joining us as we focus on practical approaches to long COVID. Today, we'll focus on disability and long COVID. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to submit any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of your questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Our speaker today is Eddie Dabdoub, founder of Dabdoub Law Firm, whose sole purpose is helping people get their disability benefits from insurance companies. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, Eddie is one of 5 attorneys in his immediate family. Since becoming a lawyer, he has specialized in disability insurance claims, appeals, and litigation. Eddie is nationally recognized for his expertise in disability insurance claims governed by the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, as well as claims made under individual disability insurance policies. Eddie and the attorneys at Dabdoub Law Firm specialize in disability insurance law, as well as life insurance, representing clients across the country in ERISA disability insurance and individual disability insurance claims, appeals, and lawsuits. Eddie has successfully litigated some of the most unique and complex disability insurance cases, and we're honored he's chosen to be here today to share his expertise. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction.
You're very welcome. It's all yours.
I'm happy to be here. Okay, so long COVID, it's been the talk of the medical community for several years now since the pandemic. And even though we're now several years post the pandemic, we're still seeing doctors trying to grapple with it. There's a lot of good research taking place, and some great doctors now are starting to treat the condition with varying degrees of effectiveness. But what we're seeing though, what I'm seeing on the legal side is obstacles for folks who are disabled because of long COVID, obstacles erected by the insurance companies to prevent them from getting disability benefits. And so the purpose of today's webinar is to speak just about that, right? About what are some of these obstacles and what are some of the things we can do to strengthen our claim for disability benefits. And this conversation is specific to insurance. So I want to start by just explaining the context of which I'm going to be presenting. Someone who is disabled from long COVID and unable to work has several potential avenues to collect disability benefits. One is through the Social Security Administration. These are government benefits, and anyone who has been working and paying into the Social Security system through taxes are eligible to collect Social Security disability benefits. Now, that's an entirely different area of the law than insurance claims. And so today we're going to be speaking about insurance claims with private for-profit insurance companies and not the Social Security Administration. However, there is going to be a lot of overlap. And a lot of the things I'm going to be speaking and addressing today will also be beneficial to anyone who has a Social Security disability claim. So a lot of it will translate into that context. All right, so then just briefly now, again, I am Eddie Dabdoub. I'm the firm's managing attorney. I've been practicing for nearly 20 years. And over the years, I've seen just about every medical condition someone could be disabled from. And my law firm has developed over the years to specialize in disability insurance claims with insurance companies and not the Social Security Administration. With that background in mind, I want to talk now about long COVID. All right, let's begin with just kind of framing what exactly is long COVID. And long COVID is defined generally as the symptoms or conditions that continue to develop after COVID-19 infection. Now, not everyone who has a long COVID diagnosis necessarily had a COVID-19 diagnosis, right? Think about in the early days where testing was difficult. It wasn't always easy to get tested on time. So it's not necessary to have a COVID-19 diagnosis to be diagnosed with long COVID. And the point I want to emphasize on diagnosis here is for disability insurance claims to be approved, you don't have to prove that you had a positive COVID-19 diagnosis. Sometimes insurance companies are demanding it, but that would actually be unlawful. You're not required to prove that. We'll talk about what you're required to prove, but that is not one of the things you must prove. Common symptoms, right? So what are some of the common symptoms we see in the law firm? We have clients who, some are high functioning individuals that have developed brain fog and they're unable to process or function cognitively in the same way that they had been before. Another hallmark symptom of long COVID is intense, debilitating fatigue, the type of fatigue where you rest or you sleep and you wake up and you're still exhausted. It's as if you've got no rest at all. Headaches are frequent and common with long COVID. We have pulmonary issues presenting itself with shortness of breath, poor sleep, of course, diffuse pain, diffuse pain, joint muscle pain, and of course, some people also have gastro issues, stomach pain, loose stool, that sort of stuff. One of the things you can tell about long COVID is that the symptoms are just all over the place, right? There is no one size fits all, and it seems to affect different people differently. And that's why it's considered a multisystemic condition. It affects nearly every part of the body. Now, on the insurance side, the combination of these symptoms become a bit of a problem legally. Why? Because the majority of these symptoms I've described, they're inherently subjective. We can't have someone undergo an MRI and it tells us how much fatigue they have, or how bad the headaches are, or how frequent the headaches are, right? Or the muscle and joint pain. There is no traditional objective testing to document the presence of a lot of these symptoms or the severity. So in the insurance world, insurance companies call these subjective symptoms that are unverifiable by objective medical data. That's a fancy legal jargon that insurance companies have been using as one of the main methods to deny long COVID disability insurance claims. And we're going to talk about that, but essentially, the way my law firm has been handling that is we say, well, that's just a fancy way of you trying to call our client a liar, or to suggest our client is not being truthful and transparent, honest about what they're experiencing. One of the other things that we've seen with long COVID is most of our clients they haven't been under the care of a treating physician that really understands the disability insurance claims process. And sometimes it also takes our clients years to find the right treating physician. And so the timing of when they get under the care of the right physician who understands long COVID and how to help during the claims process with an insurance company, the timing is such that the insurance company has already denied the claim. And that becomes a problem. And on the other side, one thing all 8 attorneys in my law firm, we all see, and we speak about this in our regular meetings, is the insurance companies seem to have purposely decided that the medical reviewers that they're going to be using to review your medical records to determine if you're disabled are doctors who have no clue about long COVID, haven't treated anyone with long COVID, and certainly haven't specialized in long COVID, right? So there is some amount of willful closing of their eyes here by having the inappropriate physicians or medical community review disability claims. So with that background in mind, right? With the background in mind of long COVID symptoms can be inherently subjective. Insurance companies like to highlight and emphasize the lack of objective medical data, as they call it, and also keeping in mind that insurance companies' doctors are really not equipped to be making disability reviews involving these types of conditions. What do you do? And that's where that's what we want to talk about right now. The law firm has spent an incredible amount of time going back to the drawing board. We first really did a deep dive analyzing the problem. Why are the insurance companies denying so many of these claims, disproportionately denying long COVID claims compared to other claims? And we started to see a common theme in the rationale from the insurance industry. And we realize it's not so much that they don't think people are disabled. We think it is that they know folks are disabled, but here is an opportunity to deny disability benefits by creating arguments that the medical evidence isn't supportive. And so having identified this created problem by the insurance company, we've come up with our own legal strategy, if you will, for addressing it. And since the pandemic, and in working on this legal strategy, we have been connecting with doctors and researchers, just anyone in the medical community who's been specializing or focusing on long COVID, to build out a network of providers and folks who can help us on this journey in helping our clients. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that legal strategy would look like. And although this is specific to disability insurance, the same legal strategy could be used for Social Security disability cases. And I will say it's not easy, it's not cheap, but you will all agree with me, your case is just too important to take the easy path and to not appreciate the need to spend money to protect your right to collecting these future benefits. With the prognosis of long COVID uncertain, nothing could be more important at this time. So let's dive right in to the type of evidence that we end up putting together to create a very strong and overwhelming case for disability. The first thing we do, after analyzing the client's case, looking at all the medical records, and of course, spending a lot of time just talking to the client, getting to know what's going on, is we'll arrange to have our client undergo CPET testing, cardiopulmonary exercise testing. And this is an incredibly powerful tool. It's a good test as far as objectively assessing someone's impairment due to fatigue. It's not perfect. There's no test in this arena that is perfect. But one of the important things is it does give us some objective data that we can use to push back against the alleged lack of objective evidence. And significantly here, the federal judges in our cases are now starting to accept CPET as a valid form of a test to prove disability. They're accepting it as reliable an indicator of someone's functionality that, compared to anything else out there. So the first thing is we have our client undergo CPET testing. We'll get a report. We'll evaluate the report. And then we take that report and we send it off to another expert in CPET testing. And this expert in CPET testing is going to independently validate the results of the CPET report. And that's important because the insurance companies will attack and challenge the validity of a CPET report and suggest that it's unreliable. And so by getting it independently validated by a second expert really protects against an attack like that. There is a point where when you start to build up proof upon proof upon proof of disability, the insurance company cannot attack it all without looking completely unreasonable. And that's the objective here. We want to put together such overwhelming and thorough evidence of disability that the insurance company must accept it because it is the truth, it is the reality of what our clients are going through. Or alternatively, they must try and attack all of it. But to attack all of it means they must reveal themselves to be biased and unreasonable. The second piece here on the list is a neuropsychological evaluation. Right? Similar to CPET, a neuropsych eval is really as good as it's going to get to documenting cognitive impairment. Anyone experiencing cognitive decline, brain fog, memory loss, difficulty concentrating, processing speed slowing down, you can't really work with that sort of decline, right? And so it's also very difficult to substantiate. But people who know you well, they will be able to relate, they will be able to understand, they'll be able to see that drop off. But in terms of traditional medical evidence, it's really hard. But that's where a neuropsychological evaluation comes in. And the good news here is that this has been a test that has been around for a while, and it is accepted throughout the courts. And so we get our clients who are experiencing cognitive impairments, even if it's mild, we have them undergo neuropsychological evaluation by an expert. And then when we get that report, we also get it independently validated, just like we do on the CPET report. And so now we have two very powerful pieces of evidence. We have a CPET report that concludes the client's functionality such that he or she can't sustain full-time work. We have that independently corroborated and verified by another expert. And then secondly, we get a neuropsychological evaluation that demonstrates the areas of cognitive decline. And then we get it separately, independently validated. And so now these are the two main pieces of evidence that lay a foundation for a strong disability case. But we're not done. We're not done. And that's why we've been having such great success with these cases. We will then have our client undergo an independent medical examination. And this is important because during an independent medical examination, we will choose a doctor who has a training, education, and expertise appropriate to deal with long COVID. And not only will the doctor be examining our client, the doctor will be spending time with the client, taking a thorough medical history, which for long COVID, that's incredibly important. The doctor will review all the medical records, will have a copy of the CPET report, a copy of the neuropsych report, as well as the reports validating those reports. So now we're doing what we call evidence building. We have the CPET, the neuropsych report, the validation reports built on top, and we have the doctor who is an expert examining our client, taking a history and looking at all of this. And the point of this report, this examination now, is for this expert in long COVID to pull it all together and to give us the big picture of what's going on. And in doing so, write a comprehensive report that addresses specific questions that we as the attorneys put to this doctor because we know what needs to be answered in order to get the claims approved. And when all is said and done now, we get back a report from the independent medical examination doctor. And we have one last step that we take to close the circle on the evidence. The final piece of the puzzle here is called a peer review. A peer review is a review of all the medical records, documentations, and reports involved in our client's case by a physician who is an expert in long COVID or has a training, education, expertise to address long COVID. When all of this is reviewed by this physician, let's call him or her a peer reviewer, this physician then writes a comprehensive report, again, pulling it all together. The peer review will address the medical records, the client's history, the client's interview, the CPET report, the validation of the CPET report, the neuropsychological evaluation report, the validation of the neuropsychological evaluation report, and the IME report. And the peer review doctor will specifically address the question of disability. Now, I spent a great deal of time discussing medical evidence to prove and substantiate disability. And incredibly important it is, but we never forget the non-medical credibility evidence. Why? The way we see it is if we are representing someone who is disabled from long COVID, we know what this person is going through. We 100% believe our clients and their spouse and their friends, their colleagues at work. And so when the insurance companies challenge these claims and deny the claims, and they do so using terms like lack of objective evidence, or the claim must be denied because the symptoms are largely self-reported, what we know that to mean is essentially they're attacking our client's credibility. They are not outright saying your client is a fake, Eddie, but they're implying our client is a fake. And we don't just leave that suggestion or accusation standing there. We go on the attack. It is important to push back on attacks of credibility in long COVID cases. How do we do it? Well, we just discussed all that powerful medical evidence, and that in a normal world would be enough. But now we're going to talk about who our client is. What was he or she like before falling ill? Was she a rock star at work? Was she the one that hosted Thanksgiving every year? Was she the person that everybody would call to rely on when something needed to get done? What were her hobbies? Right? I mean, we've had clients who quite literally were rock climbers, and we have photos and videos of them rock climbing before becoming ill. But the point I'm trying to make is we all have a story. We all had a life before long COVID, and we need to be able to highlight that life, to show that life, to show that person, and to put that clear picture of that person front and center of the case. We must never forget that the center of the case is a human being that once thrived and was doing well until this disease struck. And so we'll also ask for transcripts from college, resumes, and we'll get personal statements from friends and family and co-workers who attest to what this person was like. And we paint a very clear picture of what our client was like before falling ill. And so with that in mind, we've now closed the circle on presenting a strong case with evidence to prove someone's disabled from long COVID. We have overwhelming medical evidence that's complete and thorough. And then we have the story on the other side of the person, and we personalize what their journey has been like, and we highlight their struggles. And you match those two things together, what you end up with is a very strong case that we as attorneys then use a strategy called polarizing the evidence. And by that, what we mean is we take all this evidence and we shove it under the noses of the insurance companies, and we say, accept the reality that all of this evidence, that all the doctors were shouting from the rooftops, saying that this person is disabled, is the reality of what is going on, and pay this claim. Or we push them out into what we call la-la land, where we portray them as extreme and unreasonable and detached from reality. And by polarizing the case, what we're doing is we're not leaving the insurance company to stay in the middle, where they get to argue, well, the symptoms aren't so bad, well, there isn't that much of objective evidence. We don't get caught in the middle. And this is where the attorneys who handle these cases, other than my firm, they end up losing these cases. We go over here, where we win the cases by overwhelming them with proof of disability, or we push the insurance company to the other side by polarizing and making them seem unreasonable. That, in a nutshell, at 30,000 feet as an overview, is one powerful strategy to prove disability due to long COVID. All right. And so with that in mind, I'll turn it over to any questions about the strategy, my experience with long COVID, or just about anything to do with the subject.
Thank you so much, Eddie. That was a great presentation, very informative. We appreciate it. And anybody out in the audience that has questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we will have Eddie answer them for you. We do have a couple questions to start with. If a patient has been denied already, what can they expect from the appeals process by using this strategy?
Great question. If someone has been denied, they have to go through an appeals process. If their disability insurance claim is governed by the federal law, ERISA, it's a mandatory appeals process. And what you can expect is, if this strategy is followed, I can share with you that we've won every case. The insurance companies capitulate. Why? Because this is a strategy that's so unique to us. It's so overwhelmingly powerful that they look at it and they go, well, we're not going to win this one. Eddie's going to make us look extraordinarily unreasonable. So we're going to pay this person and we'll move on to someone else who is not using a similar strategy. So essentially, insurance companies are savvy enough to pick the fights that they need to fight.
Great. It's very encouraging to know that. We have a question about access in terms of the CPET and the neurological evaluation that you recommend for patients that have barriers to access, either where they live or financially. Is there one that you would recommend going with first that's shown more success? Or is it really just getting everything that you recommend that has given success to your clients?
Yeah, another great question. I think if I had to choose one, right, I would choose the CPET if the primary disabling symptom is fatigue. If, on the other hand, the primary disabling symptom is cognitive impairment, then I'd go with a neuropsych. So you know your body, you know what's going on, and if you can only choose one, then I would choose either the CPET or the neuropsych, depending on the symptom. And you're right, access is a problem. When we started this years ago, there were only 2 or 3 facilities around the country offering CPETs, and that is slowly changing. So it's encouraging to see that more providers, more facilities are offering CPET testing now.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Those are all the questions that we have. To our audience, you can see Eddie's information there on your screen. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to him. You will receive a recording of this presentation. We at Compendi RX are committed to continuing the discourse and learning about long COVID. There is such a need for ongoing learning and pragmatic discussions for those impacted, healthcare professionals and researchers alike. The Compendi RX beta platform is now live. You can refer to that platform for resources or email hello@compendyrx.com with any questions that you have. Eddie Dabdoub, thank you so much for joining us. And to our audience, we thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here. It's supporters like you who play a vital role in continuing the efforts to support those affected by long COVID. So thank you again. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.